Today we will demonstrate the creation of a full solid application using the open source low-code platform GO-Lowcode, all in less than 30 minutes and with no manual code. We will create an application where a user can share status updates and comment on status updates. One status update can be linked to one-to-many status comment, and the status update is authored by your user profile. A status comment is also authored by your user profile. All data will be stored in the solid pod, and the data will be stored on the pod of the user who created the status update or the status comment. So let's have a quick look at the final application we want to build. We will first connect to the pod of Walter Almeida to check what files we have. So we open the repository for Walter Almeida solid pod. We go to the public folder, and this is where we will store our files for status updates. So let's go and connect to the application. So we'll connect with Walter Almeida user, give authorization to access the pod data. And here we arrive to the list of status updates. Here we create a new status. And the status is displayed in the application with date and time. Here we can navigate to the status update and we can add comments. So here I will comment my own post. Here my comment appears. So I can add a second status update just for the demonstration. And here my two status updates appear. If I go to my solid pod, I can see that now I have a file with my two statuses published directly in my pod. And I have another file for comments on my status update. So here I can see my own comment on my own pod. So now we will log out and connect with another user. So we connect with Léo Dupont, give access to the pod for the application. And here we can see we are connected as Léo Dupont, and we see the two posts of Walter Almeida. And here I can add my own status update as Léo Dupont. So I can see with the user profile of each post on the right column. Here I can see the comment of Walter Almeida on his own post, and I will add a comment as Léo Dupont to Walter Almeida status update. Here we are. We can see the two comments from Léo Dupont and Walter Almeida. If I click on Léo Dupont, I can see the profile of Léo Dupont. I can see all the status updates for Léo Dupont and all the comments. Here the comments we did on Walter Almeida status update. Here I navigate to the status update which I commented, and I can see all the comments again. Here I have all the user profiles of user accessing this application. And if I go to one user profile again, I can see all the status update of that user and all the comments that were done by this user to any post. Here, if I go to Léo Dupont storage, so I will reconnect here to Léo Dupont solid pod. And here, open the storage for Léo Dupont. If I go to the public folder, I will see the two files for status updates here, so I can see Léo Dupont status update. And I can here see the comment that I did on Walter Almeida post. Here we can we have the link to the post in Walter Almeida pod, and here the user web ID of the post that I commented is walteralmeida.inrupt.net. So now let's see how we can create this application using the generative objects Go-Lowcode platform. So we connect to the Go-Lowcode platform. We have here an empty project, we load it, and we will start modeling. So we start by going to the platform configuration to specify that the membership use provider is solid. So we can connect with a solid account. And we will model all the entities of our application, starting by status update. We specify here the data source. By default is a database, but we will say that this data is stored on a solid pod. Here we will create a namespace for this entity. We could use an existing ontology, but for the demonstration we create our own namespace. The entity type name will be status update. And the document name on SolidPod will be statusupdates.ttl, and we will store this at the root of public. We now will model all the fields of our entity, starting by a text field that will be the actual status. Here we map this to a field on the SolidPod data named label from RDF schema. We will also add a datetime field for the date of the status update. And we will map this to the schema.org ontology start date. Here I can see that some system fields were added, especially like the user web ID who created the status update. And here I will create a calculated field to be able to open the SolidPod repository for the user. So it will be a calculated field of type string, and the value will be a tag, so that we can have a link displayed clickable referring to GoUser web ID. We will put this on a blank page, and the display will be the GoUser web ID itself. Here we will have some default rules. We will have a default value for the date time, the status date. That will be the date of the creation. So we have a keyword called now for this. We create a new entity called the status comment for comments on status updates. Again, this is a SolidPod entity, will be stored on a SolidPod data source. We use the same namespace as before, and the entity type name is status comment, status update comment, and we will store this on a file called statusupdatecomments.ttl. Now again we will model all the fields for this entity. So we will have a text field that will be the actual comment, mapped to RDF schema labeled field. We will add the date of the comment, mapped to schema.org start date. And again, we also do the same calculated field for having a link to the user who created the comment. And we copy the same expression as before. again, a business rule for a default value for the date. That will be the date of the creation by default. So we create another entity for the user profile. So again, the data source is a solid pod data source. The namespace will be schema.org and type name person. And we will map to the profile card and data for the given user. So this is the profile of the solid pod account. Since we are already targeting me, we don't need the ID as a primary key. And here we will map now a few of the properties available on the user profile, starting with the full name of the user. So we map this to the vcard fn field, and we will map egal with also the organization name of the user, and we will map these to, again, vcard organization name, and we will map the role of the user, mapped to, again, vcard, the role property. We also add a calculated field for the user web ID as for the other entities. So it's of the string, and we will create the same value expression than before. Here we are. For each of the entity, I will decide on the title field. This is the field that will be used for the creation of the user interface. To list, for example, all the status updates, the status is the one used as the primary field. And for the user profile, it will be the full name of the user. I will now model all the relationships between all my entities, and we have a relation one-to-many between a status update and the comments, meaning that for one status update we can have many comments. We have a many-to-one relationship between status comment, status update, and the user profile. So the status update is authored by your user profile. Here we will model the link directly manually between the GoUser web ID of both entities. And the same way we have a many-to-one relationship between status comment and the user profile. So user profile can have authored many status comment, and one status comment is authored by one user profile. We here model the connection between the two through the user web ID. Now that we have done this on the entities, we will see that we have the relation fields that are now included on the entities. And here, and we'll map this, the link between status comment and status update. I will map this to field to be stored on the status comment field to connect to the original post that was commented and give it a name. So the status update and comment are linked through the ID of the status update and the GoUser web ID of the status update. I'm now ready to auto-create a user interface for this application. So this is a default user interface created that we can then manually modify, which we'll be doing here. So here we have all the grids, list of data that are automatically generated, and we will change a few things. For instance, for the status date, we want this to be the first column of the list of status updates and include the time. We don't need the user web ID link because we will be using the user profile full name, and we don't need the GoUser username, which is a system field. Same for the status comments. We will put the date first column, and we will add time. We'll change here we'll change a few settings like the title of the grids. Here for the list of status comment, we don't need the user web ID, we don't need the GoUser username, we don't need the status update value here. Here I will change the title of user profile by commented by, because this corresponds to who is commenting the user profile. Here I'm changing a few of the default value labels applied to all the elements. I will duplicate the status comment grids because I want a grid on the user profile to have all the status comments for a given user. And for this grid, which I will be calling comments by user, I will add a few columns that are pretty useful, which are the actual status update that is commented and the user corresponding to the status update. So this is the owner of the status being commented by this comment. And we add a link so that when you click on this, we can really redirect to the user profile detail page. And we will add the status update itself that is commented by this comment. And we will also add a link so that when we click on the status, it can actually display the page of this status. I will also change a few things on the list of user profiles, like the default labels of the list. And for user profile, on the list of user profiles, we don't need the user, which is a system field. And I will also change all the forms. So this is, for instance, the form used to create a new status update. For creating a new status update, in fact, we only need a status date field, because all the rest is already in context. So we'll delete all the field displayed on this form and only stay with status. This is the form for displaying a status. Here we have, for instance, we will rename the name of a tab to make it more relevant. And here, I don't need GoUser on this form. The status date, I want to include the time and put it a bit before. I don't need the user web ID link here. Here I want to include time for status update. I forgot this before. And here we are. And I will have a few business rules to add. For instance, I want the status date to be read-only because it will be automatically set to the date of creation. I don't want the user to be able to change this. And same for the user profile. We don't want to be able to change the user profile for a status update. It's fixed at creation time. Here is the form for creating a new status comment. So same, we only need the status comment on the creation form, so we delete all the rest. These were added automatically by auto-creating a user interface, but we don't need them. This is a form for actually displaying a status comment. So we don't need the date. We want to include time and put it as the first information displayed. We don't need GO-User. We don't need here to display the status update because we are already in the context of a status update, so it will be redundant. The user profile will rename this to commented by to make it more clear. And we don't need the user web ID link. It will be accessible through the user profile. I will add a read-only rule again for date. The date is set by default to creation date. We don't want this to be changed. And the same for the user profile. We cannot change the author of a comment. So now we will go to the form displaying the information for user profile. We rename the title of the form. And we will include directly the name of the user as the form title. We'll rename all the tabs. This is the tab that will show all the status updates for this user. And this is the tab that will display all the comments for this user. The default generated name was not very nice. Here we'll change the grid of all comments to comments by user to have the extra column we added before. I don't need GO-User on this form. This is a technical field. And the rest is okay. And now I'm ready to generate my application, but first I will say which is the landing page to be used for our application, and it will be status updates page. And now I'll launch my generation. The code will be automatically generated. It's human quality code that's generated through this model. And then it will automatically build the application, deploy the database. We have like some system information in this database. And here my application is available. We will first connect to the pod of Walter Almeida to check what files we have. So we open the repository for Walter Almeida solid pod. We go to the public folder, and this is where we will store our files for status updates. So let's go and connect to the application. So we'll connect with Walter Almeida user, give authorization to access the pod data. And here we arrive to the list of status updates. Here we create a new status. And the status is displayed in the application with date and time. Here we can navigate to the status update and we can add comments. So here I will comment my own post. Here my comment appears. So I can add a second status update just for the demonstration. And here my two status updates appear. If I go to my solid pod, I can see that now I have a file with my two statuses published directly in my pod. And I have another file for comments on my status update. So here I can see my own comment on my own pod. So now we will log out and connect with another user. So we connect with Léo Dupont, give access to the pod for the application. And here we can see we are connected as Léo Dupont, and we see the 2 posts of Walter Almeida. And here I can add my own status update as Léo Dupont. So I can see with the user profile of each post on the right column. Here I can see the comment of Walter Almeida on his own post, and I will add a comment as Léo Dupont to Walter Almeida status update. Here we are. We can see the 2 comments from Léo Dupont and Walter Almeida. If I click on Léo Dupont, I can see the profile of Léo Dupont. I can see all the status updates for Léo Dupont and all the comments. Here the comments we did on Walter Almeida status update. Here I navigate to the status update which I commented, and I can see all the comments again. Here I have all the user profiles of user accessing this application. And if I go to one user profile again, I can see all the status update of that user and all the comments that were done by this user to any post. Here, if I go to Léo Dupont storage, so I will reconnect here to Léo Dupont solid pod. And here, open the storage for Léo Dupont. If I go to the public folder, I will see the 2 files for status updates here. So I can see Léo Dupont status update. And I can here see the comment that I did on Walter Almeida post. Here we can, we have the link to the post in Walter Almeida pod, and here the user web ID of the post that I commented is walteralmeida.inrupt.net.